everyone who's just joined us, welcome. Please introduce yourself by writing down your name, your university, and your country down in the chat box. It's amazing seeing so many people from all around the world here, so let's go ahead and begin. We're first going to have our moderated dialogue with our guest speakers, and then we're going to open it up for question and answers. Please remember to always mute yourself when you are not speaking and throughout the webinar. So my name is Karen Jubnani, and I'm Program Coordinator for the Millennium Fellowship. Joining us today are three extraordinary Millennium Fellowship alumni, Netia McCray, Samantak Bhadra, and Toby Norman. Netia McCray is the CEO and founder of Medika. Medika is a not-for-profit organization that's focused on providing youth around the world with the tools needed to overcome challenges in bringing solutions for themselves and their communities into reality through educational workshops, online video series, and a product line of do-it-yourself kits. Since 2011, Medika has assisted over 2,000 young people all around the world to realize their true potential and unleash their inner innovator and entrepreneur. Samantak Bhadra is an ex-journalist, a social entrepreneur, a writer, a musician, and a software engineer. He was a guest speaker at the Cognizant Innovation Summit in 2012 and was one of the youngest trainers at the Bangalore office of Cognizant Technology Solutions. He has founded two poetry movements called Let Poetry Be and The Sound of Poetry in the cities of Bangalore and Pune, respectively. He is currently pursuing an MBA degree from Symbiosis University of Business Management in Pune. He founded Quad, the debating and quizzing society of the Institute, which currently organizes events with the aim of sensitizing and empowering individuals to create opinionated leaders of tomorrow. Quad plans to make an impact in the local communities surrounding the campus by initiating dialogues between the students and the members of the communities and by utilizing the skills and capabilities of the students to drive positive social change. Last, Toby Norman is the CEO of Simprints, a nonprofit tech startup backed by USAID, DFID, and the Gates Foundation to develop low-cost mobile biometric scanners to improve patient identification in developing countries. Around 4 saving lives at Birth Winner and Business Weekly's 2015 Startup of the Year, Simprints develops hardware and open source software that integrates safe, simple identification into existing mobile tools. The goal is to radically disrupt the inaccurate way to track and deliver progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals and instead build a world where every person actually counts in the fight against poverty. He is also a Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation Fellow and a 2017 Schwab Foundation Social Entrepreneur. Welcome, panelists. It's a pleasure having all of you here today.
Pleasure to be here.
Hi, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming out. I'm seeing over 50 people here today.
Hey, hi, what's
Would one of the panelists like to start by sharing their initial remarks?
Sure, shall I kick us off? It's
Great.
Toby Norman speaking. Can you guys hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up. All right, I'm seeing at least 2 thumbs up. Why don't I kick off a couple comments. First, it's a huge pleasure to be here today, learn more about the MCN Fellows. I've known Sam and the team for a long time. Incredibly impressed by the work you guys do. What I'll do is share maybe sort of a minute or so on Simprints, so this type of technology we're trying to build, and then talk about a couple topics, particularly for those on the line who might be interested in technology, social enterprise, that we could cover during this call. So very quickly, my background, I actually was not on the social entrepreneurship track at all when I was at university, nor was I on the technology track. I did a BA in biology at Harvard, and then it ended up doing a PhD looking at global health, particularly frontline community health workers. One of the things that came out of our work was the incredible challenge identifying patients in very low resource context. So for example, how can a health worker give a child the right vaccine if that child has no birth certificate, no formal registration, names that overlap with hundreds of other kids in that community? And globally, we have a sort of 1 billion people, roughly 1 in 7 people on the planet, who don't have any formal registration whatsoever. So we started working with partners on the front lines to see, could we use technology like biometrics to be that unique link to something like a vaccine record or maternal healthcare record? We're based in the UK. We've got a team of about 40 folks working full-time. It's a profitable social enterprise, so we're financially self-sustaining. But we really partner with governments and ministries of health who are trying to deliver frontline services in some of the toughest regions. So really looking forward to today's discussion. In particular, if any folks have questions about how do you start a social enterprise, how do you fund a social enterprise, and how do you think about building technology for social impact, I'd love to dig into some of those topics today.
Great. Thank you so much, Toby. Tia, is your microphone working? Would you like to go next?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, guys. That's why I was holding my ear like a DJ. I was trying to see what was going on my end. But hi, my name is Misha McRae. I'm the founder and executive director of FAJICA, which is a not-for-profit organization focused on STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And I am trained as a political scientist and mechanical engineer. And the way I started my journey was that I've always had a passion for building things and taking them apart, to the dismay of my parents, as well as a couple other family members. But when I got to university, I was thinking I was going to be a biochemist, not realizing I was scared of blood and other things related to biochemistry. And so I had to sit there and have a mini crisis my freshman year. What do I actually derive pleasure in? And I never looked back at the 18 years prior and realized the reason why I was interested in biochemistry was that I thought I could be in the lab and create something. The reason I flirted with criminal psychology was that I wanted to create doll houses reenacting murder scenes, not the actual investigation of the murder, but the actual setup of the actual dollhouse. And there was a theme that I didn't realize, and that was I was an engineer. And so throughout university, while I was exploring that, I also wanted to make sure that other students had that opportunity to see whether or not a STEM field was for them, and for me to be one of their mentors along with my colleagues to help them navigate that. 9 years later, in university, would I thought I would still be doing this? No. Is it something that gets me up in the morning and makes me realize that this is my purpose in life? Yes. And so right now, we're pretty much a team of 5 people. Our global headquarters is based in Boston, but we still operate in sub-Saharan Africa as well as Latin America. And we focus on doing hands-on workshops to show you how you take your idea, whether it's a random idea for a see-through toaster, all the way into a prototype that is physical and you can communicate with people and try to get onto a store shelf. We also actually have now expanded into doing digital resources, more like Khan Academy, because what we found is that according to the infamous Nick Kristof quote from the New York Times writer, talent is universal, opportunity is not. And a lot of the things that prevent people from taking their idea and transforming it into something physical to communicate with other people is lack of access to the knowledge, resources, or skills on how would you do that? What is product design development? How do you create something? Because you guys are hearing me talk right now, but if I showed you a video of what I do, you're like, oh, I get what this blabbering woman's talking about. Same thing when it comes to a product. And so we started doing videos and online guides to explain how do you take your idea and use something called computer-aided design, 3D printing, laser cutting, and all these resources that have been locked away for a good period of time, and showing people how to use those tools in order to bring their ideas to the next level and become a solution to tackle a global challenge facing themselves, their family members, or their communities. So that's what we're about.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction, Nisha. I think we're going to jump right into Samantak's introduction now.
Hey, hi, Kiran. Thank you so much for inviting me. And Nydia, that was such an animated introduction. I wanted you to go on forever. But yeah, I'm totally inspired by what Toby and Netia is up to. I'm like, it's amazing. And here in India, so I mean, the bio you talked about, I mean, I'll just quickly update. That's the bio till 2014-15. I was doing my MBA back then. And so Code was an organization that I wanted to kind of build up while I was in B school, business school, so to say, at that time. Can you guys hear me properly? Just a small range. Yeah. So at the time, I just kind of realized a small thing that uh, business school students in the country kind of were thinking or learning stuff in a very unidirectional manner. There was not much of awareness about social issues. More than awareness, what was more dangerous rather was that there was not much of an opinion about such matters. So that was where the idea stemmed from, and we said, hey, let's start building opinions, because having opinions about certain things forces you to learn about them, forces you to kind of develop a sort of a leadership, kind of a layer, one might call it, an edge to that sort of a business leadership that you're anyway trying to hone. And from there, we went on to work with communities in and around the area where the campus was located. So that was Code back in the day. Soon after, I graduated and I went on to join Titan Company Limited, which is essentially, in India, it's a big name, right? It's one of the country's biggest lifestyle products company. They make watches, like jewelry, like accessories, perfumes, all that stuff. And I joined the organization in a very funny manner. I joined as a marketing guy because B school, but I also joined as a social sector guy because that's where my leaning was always. So I kind of joined the CSR wing because they were coming up with this flagship innovation program called Design Impact Awards. It's designimpactawards.in if anyone's interested. But so Design Impact Awards had this very fundamental proposition that, hey, the company has been into creating great designer lifestyle products for over 30 years, a veritable industry standard sort of an organization. So why don't we start supporting hardware designs that cause social impact? It's kind of like related diversification for the company. Kind of made sense. So they needed help with the marketing, the branding, the advocacy of it all to make it very attractive as a proposition for social impact individuals, for organizations, for startups to kind of come and say, hey, I want to take part in this. So that's how I joined. That's how my CSR stint sort of started. And the program went on to become a really great thing. I mean, like, we had entries from the MITs and Harvards to the hinterlands of Bastar and Chhattisgarh, which are like really, really forested lands in the country. So grassroots innovators to Ivy League innovators and everyone in between. So that was a really nice process. We've been working on it for 2 years. It's still going on. Eventually, I went on to also kind of look after the CSR strategy for the company. And probably that's where I'd like to also talk about, maybe, if any of you guys have questions. One is, I've seen a lot of disconnect in the way social sector organizations, startups, for-profits, impact organization, what have you, the way they perceive they should pitch to a CSR for funds and the way they actually pitch, and so to say, the misalignment in the expectations in what a CSR wing is looking for and what a social sector is pitching as. So maybe a little bit of that. And with the strategy piece, so to say, we as a company, as in, have slowly, I say we as a company because incidentally, my last day with the organization was on Friday. So right now I'm out of the organization, but I mean, I'll still say we for the sake of argument. So there has been a very pronounced move towards aligning with the sustainable development goals. There's been a very pronounced move towards environment, which we were never focusing on. We were only focusing on girl-child education, skilling for employability and employment, arts, crafts, and heritage, and some special programs like the innovation program that I was handling. So yeah, so this is essentially what I've been working on in CSR. I also led the tech piece, which is where we infuse technology into our day-to-day dealing so as to bring in far more efficiency in the way CSR management is done in the system, strategy, and design impact awards. And this is what I'd like to maybe discuss with you guys today.
Great. Thank you so much, Samantak. So we're going to jump right into the question and answer portion of our call. And I guess the first question that the fellows have for you is, how did your experience with the Millennium Fellowship shape your outlook towards social impact for your careers?
Because I'll probably just start off with that. Very interesting question, because I had a very naive understanding of the social sector before the fellowship. I was a B school guy. I was doing my marketing degree. I was this elitist, privileged guy. I was like, hey, social sector, yeah, everybody does that. That's cool. I'm just gonna spend some money, help a few people. That's fine. There's not much rocket science in it. And yeah, I mean, when I eventually joined the fellowship, I started understanding the technicality of it all. How to write a grant, the importance of empathy, the very tangible importance of empathy, and not just a wishy-washy statement to just make you feel good. The very tangible importance of a vision and mission statement and why it's important. The very tangible requirement of succession planning, which doesn't seem like a big thing when you're starting an organization, but it's going to come and hit you when you're least expecting. So I think the very science and the very structure and the very seriousness of it is something that the fellowship kind of brought home to me. And that is something that helped me kind of smoothen into a proper social sector profession eventually.
I would say I'm dating myself because I was part of the first cohort of Millennium Fellows, so it may have changed given my experience. But I think for me, we had a really great idea. We had already had success in about 5 countries at the time because we've been operating for 2 years before we were invited to become an MCN Fellow the senior year of university. I think for better or worse, because I can remember it was a long process filling out all the MCN Fellow goals and all the paperwork. And I was like, why did I sign up for this? But at the end, I will have to agree, the succession planning was amazing because we not only had it hit us once, but 4 times. Not only when I transitioned from university, but when we, as a good number of you know, the United States has had a change in, let's say, administration. And so some of our government partnerships changed immediately with the change in administrations. And we already had the blueprint because we had to have an emergency meeting before the election and go, okay, if X, Y, and Z happens on this date, what are we going to do? Because we know the platform of this particular candidate is not going to support our work. We've already been warned by our colleagues in the State Department. And using the blueprint we still had in our Google Drive from our MCN Fellowship, we were able to go, okay, here's plan A, B, and C to have our Sub-Saharan African operations and our Latin American operations break off and be their own thing, that they will not be dependent on us in case something happens. And of course, that thing happened, and immediately we were forced to put in our succession plan. So that I agree with the wishy-washy terms. I'm highly technical. I don't really like wishy-washy. And it was apparently, I did not know this, our grants and applications were coming off like an academic who would feed, like, I don't know, nuclear waste energy and oatmeal to orphans. It was one comment we received. And I was like, oh, okay. It's kind of harsh. Didn't think it was that blunt. But now we know how it looks on the other side. And making sure we still come off as a social impact organization that just happens to be run by technical folks who are empathetic was probably the greatest takeaways we had from the actual MCN Fellowship. Sorry I'm laughing so hard. It was still very traumatic receiving that comment because, yeah. Toby?
That's a fascinating story. 2 things I think stuck out in my mind in my interactions with MCN. The first, was and am still today blown away by how many passionate, really smart young people want to go work with social impact organizations. And that makes a huge difference. So, for example, when we are competing with talent, so we're coming out of the University of Cambridge, and we're competing with Amazon and Google and Microsoft Research Lab down the road. What is incredible to me and has been critical in our growth as an organization is being able to convince sharp young minds, come here, do this kind of work, don't go the traditional corporate routes. And I don't think I would have had the confidence to really back that strategy without seeing it first through MCN. And constantly I'm amazed at how much salary people will turn down, the type of opportunities people will turn down if they can come work at a place that has a social mission and a social focus. And that's phenomenal. And so that is the place to compete when you're fighting for talent. Don't try and compete on salary. Don't try and compete on the usual areas. Compete on that social mission. It has yielded huge returns for us. I think the second thing that really stuck out in my mind is how often really high caliber experts and very experienced professionals from a lot of industries, how often they will give you time if you ask for it. If you just go to someone who you think this person is, the head of this really famous organization, they're super busy, there's no way they would give you the time of day. But I just want to try and ask them for help and advice about working in social impact. You will be stunned at how many of those people will say yes and make time for you. Time they might not even find for people in other parts of their lives, even within their organizations sometimes. But if you are genuine and you're sincere and you're authentic in saying, I want to make a difference in the world, I'm not sure how, give me some advice. That was a huge learning to me, how many people say yes. And we today use that, essentially that strategy and that mentality a lot in our day-to-day work, getting access to some phenomenal partners who I don't think we normally would have been able to. So those are two takeaways, two lessons that stick very strongly in my mind. And I hope they're similar to what some folks are learning in this cohort.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. I think the importance of succession planning and figuring out the backup operations, like you mentioned, Nisha, is so important, especially given the story you just shared. And Toby, I completely agree on competing on a social mission as opposed to maybe salary or other perks. I think just having something you do and finding your purpose is something that people really want to do in order to live a fulfilled life. So thank you for sharing those points. So our next question is, in addition to the Millennium Fellowship, what else has kind of helped you guys get to where you are? And what advice would you have for other Millennium Fellows who want to pursue a similar career path to the one that you are on right now?
I guess I'll start because I haven't had anyone else to start previously. Surprisingly, I will echo the point. You'll be shocked how many people will give you time of day if you ask for it and they realize you're serious. And so I would say, strange enough, one of the more important tools, like I'm not 10,000 followers on Twitter, so realize this advice is not from someone who's like an Instagram or a Twitter celebrity, but I have 1,500. And I can send a tweet to an expert, and usually within 3 to 5 days, I get a response and we're talking in the DMs. And I would say that has probably been the most important tool, shockingly, for a lot of the stuff we've been able to do. Because a lot of folks are like, oh my God, like, how did you nab like the costume designer from Black Panther? And I said, I sent a tweet with me in my Black Panther pajamas and a toy. It was like, hey, I want to know how you created this. DM. And a couple days later, she was like, oh, that's cute. Sent a DM. And then we had a Google Hangouts in which she explained to my students how she came up with the costumes, how she did her research, etc. And mind you, that woman just got an Oscar a couple of months ago. Twitter, I think, is probably one of the more underrated tools for reaching out to experts, as well as figuring out opportunities and things around you that you can tap into, or someone else who's in your field you can collaborate with. I would say in terms of my career pathway, I am naturally an introvert, so I would rather communicate with you on the phone, build up confidence, then meet with you in person or try to do something. And I would say that my interactions with folks on Twitter and then in person and building my little networking community while I was at university was probably what finally made me take the plunge and go, I should probably make Vajika my full time. Because I was looking at Microsoft, Google, and other companies as like the more traditional routes. And I'm an MIT alum. Luckily, I don't have MIT alum debt, but if I did, I would kind of be like, do I want to do this social impact and give up this salary and being able to have a 401k and the nice house and everything else like you're supposed to or you're taught to? And being around experts and seeing how they may do and seeing how fulfilled they were even during the most difficult times in their career. And I'm not saying that they're not going to be difficult times, There are moments that I wanted to throw my computer out the window and go, why do I do this to myself? Why? Why am I doing this? But it makes you feel confident and grounded that even if later on Bhadra dissolves, there is a failure, I've done what I was supposed to do, and I know I've made an impact. And I think being around those experts and them giving me time of day, whether it was on Twitter, whether it's email or what have you as follow-ups, gave me the confidence that this was probably the right pathway and I should give it a chance. And fortunately, I'm blessed enough that the universe has worked out that I'm able to still continue to be on that path. But I also know when it's time to hang up the bat suit, that I've paid a good debt to society. Now, am I going to cash that in until I'm 75? Probably not. Wish I could, probably shouldn't. But at least I know that I did something, as Muhammad Ali would say. Made sure I paid my debt for one more day on this earth. So, yeah. Give y'all enough time. Go.
I'd love to pick up where Nisha left off, because I think that's such an important starting place, which is finding that passion first and foremost. For folks particularly who are thinking about going to the social enterprise world. So there's a lot of ways to get involved in impact, through sort of traditional UN organizations to NGOs to government to business. But for folks who are thinking about that social enterprise pathway, so I want to create a financially self-sustaining business that's going to power social good. One of the things that I would say is the starting point is looking for something that you are truly passionate about, even if it doesn't work. Because like Nisha said, no matter what, that is going to get you to stick with it, go through the good times, the bad times. And even if it doesn't fly, you've gained a huge amount by spending a lot of time with something you really, really care about. And that was critical. For example, if I think reflect on my own experience, I was never planning to go this way. You know, I went the academic route, then I was heading into McKinsey, so going into the corporate world. But there was a topic I was really interested in. I was spending nights and weekends working on. It was a side project. It was never supposed to be a social enterprise. It was never going to be a business. But finding that passion and spending more time with it at some point made me realize, hey, you know what, this probably won't work, but let's give it a try. And that was huge. The second piece of advice I'd give for folks who are thinking about trying to break into this field is not only finding an issue or topic that you have a genuine passion to and a genuine affiliation with, but try and identify at least a couple people who are going to go with you on that journey or be a key part of that journey relatively early on. And there's two ways you could think about this. One is thinking about if you want to start something, finding your co-founding group. Nothing will be more important than co-founders. And for those who maybe aren't going to start something but want to sort of join an organization, finding who is that rock star in your field or your industry who you look up to and admire, and how can I get close to that person's energy so that I can learn from them and learn from what they do. And I think we've discussed a couple, actually, how incredibly straightforward it can be to make contact with some of those people. I love the example of sending that Twitter DM. There's a whole bunch of ways you can do this, and if it's helpful, we can talk later about specific tactics. But more importantly right now, if you find someone who is that superstar, that rock star, that their work really inspires you, get close to them and their work, ask them for genuine advice, and ask if you can be part of that journey somehow. And something that I really admire and I start to see now in our own organization, people who are passionate, they will come in as volunteers and they will make themselves indispensable. And the number of people I've told, we absolutely have no space for you on payroll, we don't have any more jobs, there's absolutely no way. The difference between the ones who say, I'm going to volunteer, I'll find another job, but I will do this in my free time, I'll become indispensable. And lo and behold, 6 months later, I'm offering them a full-time role in the organization. That is incredibly telling to me. So if you're willing to find that passion and then find really good people, whether they're co-founders or someone that you support and admire, get close to those people, and then you've really laid yourself to the essential ingredients to be successful, whatever that field happens to be.
Oh, hey, hi, Samantak. There are two things that kind of really came out for me, essentially. When you talk about things that probably went right, of course, 100 things go wrong, and you don't talk about all of it because things are going to go wrong once in a while. That's completely fine. But there's two things that kind of really worked out. One is never stop making a network, like never stop growing that network, right? I mean, today you meet somebody on the road, that person may be a maybe a cab driver, you never know. I mean, could be anybody. That network you make, that person you connect with, that phone number, that email address you get, it may turn out to be beneficial for you. It may be that that person is exactly the right person you want to get in touch with 2 years down the line. So in my mind, networking is something, keep on talking, keep on meeting people, keep on like finding, like people in a cafe, keep on finding people in a co-working space, could be bloody anywhere. But what has really worked for me is this networking piece. I've always really moved from one project or one organization to another, mostly through a network. I mean, of course, there's been cold calls too, but a network has always come and rallied to my cause. And in a space like social impact, and if I were to talk about social impact in India, it's an uphill task. Okay? I call it an uphill task because it's not only about one thing, there's a stigma. If you've gone into social impact, one, you probably don't earn enough money. You'll probably never earn enough money. You're probably like this guy who'll never get to buy that particular amazing car that your peers get to buy, or whatever, etc., etc. So that stigma stays. Uh, the second piece is, um, it's still in a very realistic sense, folks still don't get it that this is a pressing issue. you know People will still cut down that tree in order to ensure that they have some more parking space in front of the house. They're like, hey, just one tree, like I'm just trimming it out. It just happened today morning for me, for example, right outside my house. So that's kind of playing in my mind a lot. So I mean the point is, one, people don't get it still. To be able to convince, or rather convert, any other person who's outside this particular sphere of social impact, it's very tough. And secondly, that stigma, like, okay, this person, he's taken up a tech job, he's become like this big senior director of some firm or whatever. And as soon as you say, what are you up to? And you say, hey, I'm trying to revive lakes. People look at you like you're some loony, like, okay, oh yeah, whatever, of course, sure, why not? Right? So I mean, in my mind, I think at least in India, that's the biggest problem we face. I mean, I face that problem as a CSR guy in a really, really, really big organization in the country. Imagine the guys who are working with the NGOs in the country. I mean, they're probably facing 100x of the same issue. So, one is, I mean, in my mind, as a result, you got to rally your forces. You got to, the social impact, the social impact family is not as dispersed as you may think. People know other people, and other people know other people. And eventually you just end up knowing more people. It's like this one community that should just come together somehow you just come together. And so, very important, I keep on harping on this everywhere people ask me, wherever people ask me, sorry, that sounded too boastful. The thing is, I mean, essentially, I mean, yes, networking is really, really big. And secondly, marketability. Like, if you have to join any NGO, if you have to join any, like Toby was talking about it, like, hey, make yourself indispensable, right? Then people turn back and give you that time. you know Indispensability can be defined in a multiple ways. It could be either tangible skill sets, or it could be just work that you've done, like a story that you have, a real lived experience, therefore felt desire and a need to kind of get into that space, which convinces the other person the very humanness of that requirement, of the desire. So for me, these two areas really, really, really have worked well for me. And I feel that networking and marketability, these two things have to always be paramount, because let's face it, it's reality. For you to be able to create impact, you need to first have outcomes. To create outcomes, you need to be part of the team. You need to be on the bandwagon. And you cannot be on the bandwagon if you don't know people, if you don't start talking to people, if you don't start, saying, hi, hello, what's up? So I wanted to have a talk, especially what Netia and even Toby talked about. You'd be surprised how many people want to have that conversation. So yeah, that's from my end.
Great. Thank you all so much. Thank you for sharing the importance of finding your passion and figuring out what you were kind of meant to do on this earth. I also really want to emphasize that I love how all of your points, related. So taking a chance, reaching out to experts, growing your network, and making yourself indispensable, as Toby said. I think those were all really, really great points. And from there, I think we're just going to jump to the question and answer portion of our webinar. So Millennium Fellows, if you have any questions for our guest speakers, please ask it in the chat box and please specify who the question is going to. Remember to stay muted for this portion of the call. If we pick your question, you can unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and ask your question. So I think we already had one question that we can start with for Toby. So this question was from Dahlia. Dahlia, do you want to unmute yourself and ask Toby your question?
Hi, thank you so much. My question was regarding the funding models for social enterprises. I'm kind of curious what model you employ with your business, because I'm personally very interested in how you can scale your business while still being sustainable. And I've studied benefit corporations and different hybrid models for social enterprises. So I would just really like to learn more insight about how you've chosen to fund your social enterprise. Thank you.
Yeah, Dahlia, that's a great question, and I'm thrilled you're thinking about this already at this stage. This is a really, really important question, because if you don't think very hard and very critically about who is going to be financing this work, the work that you do, and how can that be sustainable in the long term, its chance of having long-term impact is low. And so I'm going to differentiate here between charitable funding models, so where you're looking for someone to contribute money to a cause that doesn't necessarily directly affect them, versus social enterprise funding models. And really, you've only got two options in the longest term, three in the short term. You're either getting funded eventually by your consumers. And so an example here would be something like, if people are familiar with M-Pesa or Bcash. So these are innovations that have touched millions of lives. It allows you to do mobile finance, so mobile banking, mobile microfinance, for very, very low income users. Anyone who's got access to even a basic phone can use something like M-Pesa or Bcash to transfer funding. But ultimately, they get paid. They take a fee from their subscribers, from their clients. That's the model. And so this is where you're trying to build a business, but your ultimate users and clients are potentially very low income users. That's probably, if you're working in the social impact world, what you want to target. There's a huge pro of working in a model like that, which is that you genuinely have to create value for them, or they will not continue to pay you. And so that keeps you very accountable to doing high quality work. Big challenge is that, for example, reaching the poorest of the poor with services can be really hard if those people have the least financial capacity to. And so sometimes you'll have to face perverse or challenging incentives in terms of how you build out your social enterprise. The only other payer who ultimately really matters is government. So this is, for example, in the provision of something that would be considered a public service. This is closer to what Simprance does. So our clients are governments, for example, like the Ministry of Health of Ethiopia, or they're really large NGOs that are funded by government bodies. So say, for example, work with BRAC. It's one of the world's biggest social enterprises in Bangladesh. But they are funded by USAID, which is actually the US's government that spends hundreds of millions of dollars every year trying to improve global health. They do that for diplomatic reasons. They do that for strategic reasons. They do that for ethical reasons. There's a whole bunch in there, but the government is the payer. And so we will sell our projects directly to governments or through third parties to those governments, and they're the ones who pay. Either model can work. Either model can get to scale. There's a number of really top social enterprises that have gone both routes. The one route that I have never seen work in my career is trying to build a largely charitably funded social enterprise that in the long term relies on charitable donations for its core operations. There are plenty of charities that have social enterprise arms, and those can work really well. It's critical how you initially fund the business, and particularly if you can't get, for example, venture capital or equity investment. I think charity impact awards, social enterprise awards are phenomenal sources. And if it's helpful, I can share a list of names and places to look. But if you're not thinking very early on about which of those two ultimate payers you're going for, then I don't think you'll achieve the scale you're capable of achieving down the line.
Great, thank you so much for that response, Toby. So our next question is from Adriana. Adriana, go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself, your name, your university, and your country, and ask your question.
Okay, hi, my name is Adriana. I am from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And my question was to Netia, and I was wondering, when working with governments, like governments can be really complicated. And so when I want to go back to my country and be able to create a really an impact, but my government can be really, it's complicated. And so I was wondering if you had like any tips on like what to do when like maybe the government won't help you or sort of that line. So, yeah.
No worries. Okay, so if anyone's from Brazil or South Africa, I'm going to apologize for what I'm about to say, but I'm going to use those two examples. Start with Brazil. So government is a beast. I am not, what is it called? What's the name of the movie? Devil Wears Prada. I am not Meryl Streep in Devil Wears Prada. So I don't walk into the room like I will stab you with a stiletto. And I feel there's this persona for people who are able to get successful government contracts, especially if you are female, that you have to be cutthroat, have the greatest network, and pretty much be like, if you want to do X, Y, and Z, you have to deal with me. You can't go around me. My experience has been, I never work directly with the government. I never directly approach a government organization or a government arm. I usually try to find the back door. And the reason why I always say try to use the back door is there's always someone who is sympathetic to your cause. To an earlier point, a lot of people don't understand social enterprise. And a lot of people look at America and they're like, oh yeah, you guys understand social enterprise because you have that safety net, because you glorify people who create nonprofits and social enterprises and social impact organizations. And I go, just like in tech, that's a particular person who's glorified. As an African-American woman in America, I usually don't have a safety net to go into social enterprise or to create a nonprofit. I have to support a family and a lot of family members. So I have to make sure there's always food not only on my table, but other people's tables. And I have my family who sometimes go, you turned down a six-figure job to help kids who aren't going to say thank you or don't understand what you're doing. And there's the same mindset in a lot of these government organizations. For example, I'm in STEM. STEM was a hot buzzword for like the past 5 to 7 years. So a lot of organizations who would send government representatives to America for the Science Awards or ASA or ASME for mechanical engineers, they're like, yes, we need to do STEM programming. We need to do like what the Americans are doing. And then you walk into their office and you're like, hey, I'm an American. I was one of those doing those awards and I speak Portuguese and I can bring the same programming to you. We've already done this Belo Horizonte. Look at these photos and videos and testimonials. No. They go, yeah, or sometimes they're very blunt to your face, like, no, we're not going to do this. What I found is that if you have a university partner who already has to deal with government, who already has their little backdoor entryway to working with the government, I would say that is probably 80% of how we get our government contracts, is that we co-sign or we're a co-partner with the university or another nonprofit that already has did the heavy lifting to work with that government partner. I would say also keep in mind, and I hate to say this, make sure you are well educated as to why certain nonprofits are working with the government and why others have been turned down. Because my situation in South Africa, which will be the second one I'll bring up, is that I, for the life of me, could not figure out why as soon as I walked into the meeting, we were about to sign the final paperwork to be the STEM program operator for Cape Town and Johannesburg, why all of a sudden all communication ceased. Like literally they snatched the paper from my hands in the middle of the meeting and they walked out. I was like, did I do something culturally disrespectful when I met in person? Like I couldn't figure it out. And it took me 3 months of talking to people to realize they had assumed Nisha was a male. And once I verified that I was Nisha, now mind you, they didn't do a Google search, nothing before we got to this last stage. It was me walking in and referring to myself as Nisha, and I didn't piece together the change in tone and body language when they pieced that together. when we were able to find another nonprofit organization led by a male who was willing to be our cover for this government contract, then they felt comfortable because the project was being led by a male. So there's always those nuances when you're dealing with government, and you just have to figure out what is the back door and how do people actually get stuff done. And regardless of whether you're here in North Carolina or wherever you are, nothing is as straightforward as a website or a book says. You have to be creative and hack around it to make it happen. And I will say your best advocates are people who have seen your work, who are willing to stick their neck out for you. I don't think anybody would have been willing to help us skirt around all of this if they didn't go, I've seen her workshop. This actually is something we need. She's about her business. This can actually create impact. If that helps answer your question, I'm trying to be nice, but it is a challenge.
Yeah, thank you. It really did.
Great. Thank you so much, Nisha. Our third question is from Davis. So Davis, go ahead, unmute yourself and introduce yourself, your name, your university, and your country. I'm just going to ask the question for you, Davis. Sorry. Okay, so Davis's question was to Samantak. So Samantak, could you please elaborate more on how you were able to build your network, especially connecting with experts?
Yeah, that's so for example, how you were able to do it always presumes that there would be a prescriptive answer, but of course, like anything else in life, it isn't. But the thing is, yes, essentially, if it's at all contextual for you, in this country, the way at least, perceptions are a big thing. Like let's say I'm a student and I'm approaching an expert. The obstacle or the wall that you have to cross is probably a lot higher compared to, let's say, some guy working in a CSR wing or some founder of an NGO, because they already have what I talked about before, a certain level of marketability or credibility, or at the very least, a perception of marketability or a perception of credibility. And that perception goes a very long way, even though, and more often than not, it's kind of a dirty trick in the book. If you're a student, if you're somebody, and I think even in the chat, I just glanced one, somebody was saying, like, I'm a student, how do I, kind of join up, like, how do I get somebody to, understand me, respect me for, but, I'm working on my idea. Something of that question was also there. So I'm just going to tie that in too. Thing is, there's one scenario where you don't have much of an experience, but you really want to network. The first thing you do is tell the expert. The way you approach that expert is saying, hey, you talk about the work that the expert is doing. You don't talk about yourself. You don't say, hey, I have this great idea, or I am working on this. That's not how you do it, because the point is, this is not really about you right now. It's really about learning from those guys, good or bad. It's really about leaving our egos a little behind, park it at home, and just ask him. So, I just learned about the way you're working towards environmental, like, let's say reforestation, I don't know, sustainable, the way you upcycle garbage and the way you're kind of creating awareness. It's amazing. Can you please help me learn a little bit more about that? So once you approach people with such a question, once you approach people with a question that's very relevant to what those people are working on 24/7, you more often than not have their attention, at least for a few seconds. If nothing else, that person will at least reply with a one-liner saying, hey, you can find my work at this website, or, hey, that's great. Please get in touch with me later. I don't have time right now. But the thing is, getting a response from these guys is 50% of the work done. First, let's not talk about ourselves. Let's really learn about everything that these guys are up to. If you're willing to commit a little bit more, the next step you can take is, hey, can I work with your organization? Not as a job. Of course, we're looking for a job. Like I said, it's context. It depends on how good a trust you build, the vibe you get from the person, so on and so forth. It really varies. But the thing is, here you're not really talking about saying, hey, so, I am interested in this and I am working on this. You don't talk about that. You say, hey, so that's amazing. I mean, like, you've been able to work on something like this. It is environmental piece. And, I've been wanting to learn about upcycling, and I'm kind of hitting a dead end everywhere. Can you please let me know, how a person like me can just start off learning about sustainability, learning about upcycling? You don't say, can you please help me understand how I can make my idea regarding upcycling a better one? That's a bigger discussion, and the person who's really busy, an expert who's really like worth it, maybe like, okay, I don't know, maybe I'll just respond to this text message maybe tomorrow, and you've kind of lost your cause there. So in my mind, the way I've always done it is always kind of make the conversation about the expert and not about me. Let the expert talk about the expert, and let that expert say, and we just imbibe. And at the end of it, if, again, depending on context, depending on the vibe you're getting, you very organically push in your idea. Say, hey, that's amazing. So, in that context, I just wanted to maybe just drop a line and say, I'm working on something like this. Do you think ... Those things work. Maybe, again, it's not prescriptive. It's something that's kind of worked for me. And I used to just go out cold calling on many occasions. I used to hang out in many cafes around here in the city. And so I live in the city called Bangalore, and Bangalore is known for a lot of startups. And Bangalore is known to be very cosmopolitan. And Bangalore also has a lot of awareness about social impact. And there's a lot of NGOs, a lot of for-profit entities working, innovation. In fact, the building beside my house right now, they're an organization called Inito, and they're working on a non-invasive device. They're working on a non-invasive device which helps pregnant mothers kind of track their health. And it's kind of created a big buzz in the industry, and people from across the country are buying this device for some. So it's kind of, so, there's so much tech happening. There's so much tech innovation for social impact happening in this city. That's also kind of helped me, kind of smoothen out the process of building a network, but, maybe in another city, you may have it easier, you may have it harder. But I still believe that as long as you make the conversation about the expert and less about you, for 80% of the time, you have the expert liking you. At the end of the day, it's a human connect. It's not a label called an expert. It's not a label called a founder. It's not a label called a student. It does not matter. If the expert's a human at the end of the day, he's maybe just 20 years ahead of you on the curve, or just older than you. That's all he is. It's just these perceptions that make us stop from asking that person. Essentially, it's just that. And, try it out. Try reaching out to 10 experts by the end of the day or by tomorrow. Just ask the experts about their expertise and see how many get back to you. Just try it out. A fun game, one might call it. So, if you want to talk about this later, I'm always available. But yeah, this is maybe, I'm trying not to be prescriptive really hard, because I know I'm no one to be prescriptive. So hopefully that answers your question in some way or the other.
Great, thank you so much, Samantak. So our next question is for all of our panelists. It's from Adekola at Lagos State University. And the question is, after your successful graduation as a Millennium Fellow, what was one thing that kept you going as social entrepreneurs in spite of any challenges or obstacles that you encountered?
Shall I kick us off? One thing that really helped me was being passionate about what I was learning and appreciating how much of an learning opportunity the early stage career was. Something that I think when we were first messing around with the social enterprise with Simprints, we spent a lot of time talking about failure, because it had no funding, bootstrapped the organization, no supporters, no clients. We were trying to build a complex product we didn't know how to build. We had no engineers. It was really messy. It was very unlikely for a long time that it was ever going to happen. But one thing that kept us going week in, week out was knowing that every week we're learning really interesting stuff. We would have to, for example, I'd go into meetings with potential supporters and they'd say, what are your profit margins? And I'd walk out and say, that's a really interesting question. Let me get back to you. And I'd leave the room and then I'd Google, what the hell is a profit margin? And how do you do the math behind that? How do you do that calculation? And then have to get back to them. And I learned, I would say, more in 6 months of doing a social enterprise than I learned in 4 years of doing a PhD. And that belief that, hey, even if everything else fails, the learning is going to be worth it, that really helped us go through the tough times. And there have been plenty of tough times, and I know there will be plenty more.
I would say on my end, there are a lot of tough and difficult times. Oh, I am muted? I'm not muted. That's weird. Okay. So for us, there are a lot of times, especially when you're in a field that a lot of people feel they get it, but there's a lot of underlying biases and et cetera that you have to deal with, and not just your students, but you have to deal with as well. And the things that keep me going is, for example, every Halloween, instead of doing it for Christmas, we do it for Halloween. And it's our annual celebration and giving back to all of the kids in all of our communities that we're in who allow for us to do our STEM workshops. And being able to go in and do something that's STEM related and put a smile on someone's face who never thought science or engineering could be cool. I know it sounds like the cheesy, oh, it's like Barney or Sesame Street. But having someone go like, oh man, I thought engineering was boring, but you're like kind of dorky, but cool. Those are the moments that, I have no idea what just happened. Those are the moments, I have no idea what's going on. Those are the moments that kind of make me go, okay, like I want to punch this partner in the face for this morning's meeting, but this evening, dealing with this particular student and seeing that little glimmer of hope in her eyes makes me go, okay, I won't kill someone today. I'll wait till tomorrow. And it will keep you going, personally.
I'm loving all of Netia's answers. I mean, I'm sorry. I always feel like so far left behind after both of them talk about it, and I'm like, I'm just gonna pass over and just move on with life right now. So, but I mean, just like, yeah. I mean, like, seriously speaking, yeah. I mean, one technical and one non-technical element to it. One technical piece is outcome and impact. You know, when I joined, when I came into the space, everyone's talking of impact. Impact is this big bluey, you know, like, you know, shiny thing in the sky. Impact. I'm going to create impact. It's basically a synonym to the sentence, I want to change the world. But hey, you know, in a real, that's a space where I think all of us get discouraged after the initial honeymoon period is over, because impact, for example, is really at the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to the word outcome, right? Outcome is essentially, let's say, if I talk of skilling, I have taught somebody tech skills, and now that person, and I've also maybe helped him get a job. That's the outcome, and I can control that. That's up to me. I can spend a month and get 2 people that job. You know, the impact is that person becoming self-sustainable, sustaining his own family, ensuring his kids go on to have a better life, and his parents, and so on and so forth, right? Like, that impact is something I can't do anything about. But that's the impact that gets touted about on TV, on social media, on Instagram, with nice filters all the time. Yeah, I mean, that's something you can't control. And you're like, hey, you know, I've spent a year trying to like teach people, you know, like, you know, how to code, but I don't know. I don't think I've done enough. The fact that we've even taught 100 people how to code, that is enough. That is 200,000 X times more enough than anybody else in the country right now, anywhere else. So I think one thing that keeps me going is ensuring that my outcomes are being met. Impact will happen. Let impact be this wild child that takes care of itself. I don't care. I mean, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen in some way, through some route I'm gonna learn about. Maybe somebody's gonna call me up 10 years down the line, you know, when I'm like, yeah, I'm like, and maybe I'll be like, hey, so something did happen. But I can't let that pull me down today. So for me, outcome is really important. If I've done my bit, let the process and reality and life take care of itself. Let me just trust all of that for a while and just breathe a little easy. So for me, outcome and impact, I just hope that when people talk of social impact, just ensure that you talk about social outcomes first. Ensure your social outcomes are on point. Impact tomorrow, not today, after you've killed somebody, like that. So the thing is, so essentially that's one thing. And the second thing is, of course, like, you know, tea time conversations are amazing. You're the superstar in the room. 5 of your friends, they're working in tech, they're B school graduates, and they're like, hey, so I sold soap today. And you're like, so what I did today? And then you talk about this amazing story where, you help, I helped this, I'm working in close cahoots with a guy who's helping reviving lakes in the city. And I talk about that guy and I talk about the journey, the partnership we're having. And I have everyone's attention. So I love that. I love that because that in a small way helps slowly break the stigma around social impact professionals, especially in the country, in India. We are still, the system is an uphill task in itself, and your friends and family are another uphill task altogether, So the thing is, you can't handle both. But at tea time conversations, when you're meeting your friends over a drink, and everybody loves a story the social impact professional says, because they have genuine human stories, and no amount of soap and no amount of shampoos in the world can beat that. Absolutely not. So for me, these two things really keep me going. Yeah.
Great. Thank you all so much. That is a wrap for the questions. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. So thank you for taking the time to share your experiences with us. And I know the fellows have a few more questions and they would love to get in contact with you and keep in touch with you guys. So what would be the best way for the Millennium Fellows to contact you?
Email is great. I'll stick it in the comments.
Yeah, email.
Great. So
yeah, I'll just pass on the contact details in the chat itself.
Okay, perfect. So Millennium Fellows, if you want to get in touch with any of our 3 amazing speakers, just check the chat box and we will also be sending those emails out to you guys after. Thank you again for an amazing talk, all 3 of you. I would also like to thank all the Millennium Fellows who joined the webinar today. I hope you were able to gain some amazing insights, and we look forward to seeing all of you on our next webinar, which is tomorrow with the Sahara Group from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. EST. You can register on Crew or on the Millennium Fellowship website.
Thank you, guys.